a few years ago, the Biden administration decided to sue SpaceX for failing to hire asylum seekers.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
So we're told on the one side that if we hire anyone who's not a permanent resident, we go to prison. Now we're told if we don't hire asylum seekers who are not people who've been granted asylum, seekers, they aspire to asylum, they're therefore not a permanent resident, but if we don't hire them, we also go to prison.
Right. Well, the purpose of being damned if you do and damned if you don't is to make damn sure that you're damned.
Correct.
Right. So that's a kind of outcome.
So, I mean, that seemed to be insane and unfair. And why did the Biden administration, because they can only do so many big cases per year. There's a finite number they can do.
Yeah.
Why would the Justice Department, of all the injustices that occur, pick this as one of their biggest cases?
Yeah. Why? Why do you think?
Well, I think they probably had I don't know. There was some lawfare, I think. It was a.
What do you think?
I think it was political. I think it was
the relationship to you.
Well, I don't know all the things, but this is before supporting Trump or anything like that.
Yeah.
In fact, I supported Biden and before that Hillary and before that Obama. So.
Right. That's why I was asking if this comes as a shock.
I don't know if it could just be random. It could be. Like they didn't tell us, why pick us? Why do such a crazy lawsuit?
Random's a bad. Even if it is random, that's still bad.
It's still bad.
That's just a marker of incompetence. But if it's not random, well, it seems to me highly unlikely to be random.
Yes, and also why attack SpaceX and not say Boeing or Lockheed? I think part of it might be that SpaceX is not unionized, and the Democratic Party in the U.S. is fundamentally controlled by the unions. Mm-hmm. So that I'm speculating here, but since we're not unionized, we're I think a very happy workforce, and I'm out there on the factory floor. I don't see if people are happy. It's a good vibe.
Well, they're engaged in something ridiculously exciting.
It's
at
cool.
minimum. Well, that's not nothing. People can go a long ways if they're part of a project that's aiming at Mars, let's say. That's definitely aiming up. So that's really exciting. That's a real opportunity for people.
Yeah. So my view is that at this point in the United States, the Republican Party is more in line with a meritocracy and with personal freedom. So
I've never had a conservative. Many times with my left-wing friends, let's say, they'd refuse to talk to someone. Oh, me included. Definitely. Because I've invited prominent Democrats to come on my podcast in great numbers for a very long time. And I've got absolutely nowhere with that. They'll talk to me in private. They will not talk to me in public. And so that's never happened.
They're afraid of being shunned.
Absolutely. 100% that's what they're afraid of.
Sure.
Definitely. And they've told me that. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
But that's never happened on the Republican side. I found it much easier because I've talked to a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans. And I found it much, much easier to talk to the Republicans. And that is somewhat of a shock. I wouldn't have necessarily expected that.
Yeah, and I should be clear that it's not like I think the Republican Party is flawless. It certainly isn't. It's got its issues. There are extremists within the Republican Party that I don't agree with. But one has, it's a two-party system, essentially. You got to pick one or the other. And so you weigh the good and the bad. And my opinion is that...
And you flip the coin.
We need that the country would be better off with the Republican administration than a Democrat.
Well, Trump was pretty good at not having wars.
Yes.
Yeah, which is actually quite a big thing. It's really a big thing. And what he did with the Abraham Accords, that was a miracle, I think.
Right. No, absolutely.
He should have got the Nobel Prize for that.
I think there's something to be said that America needs a strong leader, and where you have the perception of strength. Now, you have to admire that Trump, after getting shot, was fist pumping, fight.
Yep.
After being shot.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is not
He's an ornery bastard, and he's funny too.
Yes, and he's brave. He has
Yep.
courage. This is instinctual courage.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not calculated. It's not some arranged event. It's in the moment.
Well, you could see that then, because that was not a time when you're
you
going
see true courage in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And if you want a leader who's going to deal with some very, very tough cookies out there, who's going to deal with a Putin or Kim Jong-un or
China.
Yeah, China. Or, they'll think twice about messing with Trump.
Yeah.
They'll think twice.
Okay.
And poor Biden can't make it up the stairs, and obviously he's stepped out of the race. But nobody's going to be intimidated by Biden. It's impossible. I think they will be intimidated by a guy who was fist pumping after getting. As far as I know, every civilization that has experienced prosperity has had a decline in population. There may be a few exceptions. Perhaps people can enlighten me. I'll look at the comments on this interview to see perhaps what I can learn. But it seems that from what I've read, almost every civilization, when they become prosperous, their birth rate drops.
You think that's a consequences of the emergence of something like a non-punished hedonistic egocentrism?
Well, obviously, you mean there's certainly many examples of civilizations. They become prosperous. There is generally a trend towards hedonism.
Yeah, well, you can get away with it if you're wealthy, eh? Because the consequences of your foolishness don't smack you on the head instantly.
Precisely. So, if you're a civilization under threat, like let's say if you take, say, Rome, when they were trying to not get annihilated by Carthage, and they had Hannibal running around marauding Italy, they didn't have time for hedonism.
Right.
Hedonism is not an option. We're going to get destroyed by Hannibal.
The chips are down.
And when a civilization's under stress, there's very little hedonism that takes place.
So William James said that the modern world needed a moral equivalent to war, right? He investigated the religious realm very, very deeply, and I think this was in the varieties of religious experience, and that really had an effect on me, because I think that you need something akin to an existential threat in order to set you straight.
I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if it's let's say if it's a spoiled child that that kid gets everything he or she wants, and you have sort of a Baruch assault situation, and then writ large, that is a civilization that is prosperous and where people get everything they want.
I think it's the right way to think about it developmentally and neuropsychologically, because maturation itself consists of two processes, let's say. The more mature I am, the more I'm bringing other people into the purview of my vision. So I extend myself across other people, be my family first, but then brought the community more broadly. Sure. The better you are at that, the more people you can play a game with at the same time. But you also do the same thing with the future. And that's actually, as far as I can tell, what the cortex is for. It's to move you away from primordial hedonistic motivation to this more inclusive sense of future and community, right? And that's a higher order self.
Yeah.
And so the default would be immaturity, and wealth can obviously facilitate that. And maybe it's partly because, so you're a very wealthy man. You could give your children anything they ever asked for. Okay, so why not do it? Why not every time they ask for something, why not just deliver it?
There's some wisdom that comes through the ages that you don't want to have someone be a spoiled brat. And
why do you think giving people everything they want exactly when they want it necessarily produces that? Because it seems to.
I think it almost always is.
Okay, you had a rough childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, like rough and tumble, rough childhood. Plenty of fights, and a father who was a difficult creature to contend with. Okay, what did that do for you? And are you grateful for it, or are you unhappy about it?
Well, I guess you never know the things that really made you who you are today. So at the end of the day, am I on net grateful for my life? I am. And perhaps even for the hard things. Because those hard things, I learned from them.
What did you learn? I mean, I read your biography.
It's not an autobiography.
No, it's not. No, no, definitely not.
I would tell it in a different way than Isaacson, because Isaacson, who I think is an excellent biographer, is nonetheless looking at things through his lens, and wasn't there at the time.
Right, of course, of course. Well, one of the things that stood out for me too, though, from that, and I would like your comments about this, was the rough details of your childhood. A lot of physical altercations, and a lot of, I don't know exactly how to characterize.
Altercations. I mean, I was almost beaten to death within an inch of my life at one point.
Right, that counts. Yeah. That definitely counts as a physical altercation. It wasn't just a few
blows here and there, yeah.
I think the government's role is really it's to ensure that the playing field is a good playing field, that the rules, that there are good rules. The government is essentially the football league, and like the referee, making sure that there's fair play, that like I said, that the rules are sensible, and allowing the players on the field to play the game. And what happens over time, though, is government keeps growing, and at a certain point you have more referees than players on the field, and then the game is not good. Yeah. You do need referees. I'm not saying you don't need referees, but you don't want the referees to outnumber the players. That would be silly, but that's often what happens. So it's just make sure that fair games are being played, that there are sensible rules, and don't get in the way of the players, and the results will be excellent. Like another way to think of the government is like a corporation in the limit. It is the biggest corporation, and it is a monopoly, and one that can really kind of only go bankrupt if the country goes bankrupt. So it doesn't have the sort of, commercial corporations, if they make bad products, fail to compete, then they will go bankrupt, and they should if they make bad products. So the government is essentially a corporation in the limit. And since it is monopoly and you can think of like I think one way to think of economy is just in terms of feedback loops. And the feedback loop for government provided services to be excellent is weak. Because if you have a government monopoly for anything, you as a consumer have no alternatives. You have no means of, and I would sort of say, like you said, think of the Department of Motor Vehicles, like the DMV, and it's very inefficient. And if you don't get good service from the government, what do you do? Who do you complain to? Competition breeds excellence, because two organizations or more organizations are fighting to make the end consumer happy, and one will gain market share if they do a better job than the other. So that's why we really want government to do the least, because it's just got the broken feedback loop that we're doing. With respect to laws and regulation, we do have a fundamental issue, which is a natural outcome of an extended period of prosperity, where there really hasn't been sort of a global war, or when things have been prosperous for a long time, you get an accumulation of laws and regulations naturally. And these laws and regulations are immortal, whereas humans are obviously mortal. So the longer you have this generation of this creation of rules and regulations, but you sort of get to this point where each law and regulation is not perhaps crippling in and of itself, but they're all like little strings that like a million little strings that tie Gulliver down. So like each little string, and then eventually the giant can't move. So we've in the West, I think we have created a regulatory gridlock where just almost everything is illegal. This is why they can't build a high-speed rail in California. They spent $7 billion, and there's a 1,600-foot section is all they have to show for it, and doesn't even have rails on it. It's really, too absurd for parody, because large projects are essentially illegal in California, and much of Europe and other countries. So there has to be some garbage collection process for removing rules and regulations in order for society to function and not to, get hardening of the arteries just to the point where you can't do anything. And I'm very much pro-environment, but the environmental regulations are, in my view, largely terrible. And they're very much sort of, you have to get permission in advance, as opposed to, say, paying a penalty if you do something wrong, which I think would be much more effective. To say, like, look, we're going to do this project. If something goes wrong, then we'll be forced to pay a penalty, but we do not need to go through a 3 or 4 year environmental approval process. So just changing things from, you have to get a permission in advance to you have to pay a penalty if you do something bad, I think would be profoundly effective for the advancement of large projects. But just in general, I think governments around the world should be actively deleting regulations, questioning whether departments exist. Obviously, President Blaise seems to be doing a fantastic job on this front, just deleting entire departments. Fantastic. Yes. Here's the thing about, like, if you delete departments and regulations, you can always put them back. It turns out that those were very important. You can always put them back. And really, this is like taking the brakes off of an economy and of a civilization. We need to snap those strings that are holding Gulliver down and preventing us from making progress as a civilization. Clearly, the policies of the past have not succeeded. We know that for a fact. So let us, I think, go boldly into the future. For a platform like the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, there will be things that are said that are incorrect, but it provides an immediate feedback loop for correcting things that are wrong. So if somebody says something, well, then another person can reply and rebut what that person's saying, and there can be just an ongoing sort of dialogue or argument and someone can read the whole thread and see, okay, this person said something, but somebody counteracted that. There was further rebuttals, there was more context added, and that will give them the best understanding of the situation, as compared to, say, a legacy news media article where you just have the opinion of the reporter, no rebuttal, no comments, no counter argument. And very often what's printed in the press is completely false, and people don't know. But on a real-time interactive platform like X, they can see not just what somebody said, but what are the rebuttals, what are the counter arguments. And we've got things like community notes, which I think is very helpful, where if somebody says something false, sort of inaccurate or misleading, then the core secret to community note is that for a note to be attached to a post, people who normally disagree about a subject must agree on that community note for it to be shown. So the probability of it being accurate is very high, because people who historically disagree are only going to agree on something that is quite accurate. It does seem as though civilization is reaching new heights in technology. I think we've got quite a bit of momentum. I do worry about certain existential risks, like the low birth rate, which is accelerating in most countries. And really, this is one of those things that I think is underrated as an issue, is that if there are no humans, there's no humanity. You have to make them somehow, and I think we should be very concerned about the accelerating of the birth rate. This is a super big deal. Like, basically nothing else matters if there are no humans. Like, as an initial premise, you must have humans for there to be civilization, unless we're going to leave it all to the robots. So this, I think, is massively underweighted, and I don't have a great solution to it, but it must be solved somehow, or humanity will dwindle to nothing. I think we should have an optimistic view of the future, and I do think that one sort of bad thing about the environmentalist movement is that in the sort of extreme form of the environmentalist movement, people start to view humans as a plague on the surface of the earth, as a fundamentally bad thing. And with the implication that if all humans disappeared, somehow Earth would be better off. This is the extinctionist movement. And I think you can really, at a fundamental level, you can think of things as a fight between expansionist and extinctionist philosophies. And that's what really matters. Like, everything else is, humans go extinct or civilization collapses, whatever policies we may have are irrelevant. So first and foremost, we must have an expansionist philosophy for civilization and for consciousness. We must seek to go beyond what we've done in the past to increase the number of humans. And this is incredibly fundamental. So one way or another, this must happen. Yeah.